The self is not a fixed stone, it is a seed that must be awakened by struggle. In the vast story of human existence, there is a quiet tragedy. Most people live without ever discovering who they truly are. They wake, they work, they sleep, repeating the same circle. And yet, the secret of their being remains untouched, asleep beneath the surface. Iqbal calls this the tragedy of the unawakened self. He says that within each of us lies a spark, a divine flame, a reflection of the creative power that shaped the universe itself. But this flame, this Khudi, is buried under comfort, imitation, and fear. We have become spectators of life rather than its creators. We scroll, consume, and imitate, forgetting that our true purpose is not to reflect others, but to shine from within. To Iqbal, the modern human being resembles a sleeping giant. The potential for greatness is there, vast, luminous, divine. But the giant sleeps. Why does he sleep? Because he has forgotten his origin. He has accepted a borrowed life, defined by others, conditioned by society, weakened by doubt. Iqbal's philosophy of Khudi is not about arrogance or pride. It is about remembering our divine trust, the inner dignity bestowed upon us as conscious beings. He says, man is the trustee of God's creative energy. And when we forget this trust, we shrink into shadows of what we could be. Every child is born with the fire of Khudi, a wild curiosity, courage, and hunger to create. But as years pass, the world teaches conformity. Don't stand out. Follow the rules. Be realistic. And the divine spark grows. dim.to awaken the sleeping giant, Iqbal says. We must rediscover the meaning of struggle, jihadi akbar. The great inner striving to realize one's true self. This struggle is not against others. It is against inertia, comfort, and self-doubt. Against the inner whisper that says, you are too small. Iqbal's message is bold. You are not small. You are a seed of infinite possibility. And your duty is to grow, even if it means breaking the soil of habit. In a time when the world worships ease, Iqbal calls us to effort, to discipline, to creative will. He says that the soul grows only through resistance. Just as a river shapes its power by striking against stones. Every challenge, every heartbreak, every failure is a divine test meant to awaken your sleeping strength. He writes, adversity is the nurse of the self. Comfort is its silent poison. When we stop running from struggle, we begin to taste the divine joy of becoming. Life ceases to be a burden and becomes a pilgrimage, a sacred journey toward self-realization. So the question is not whether you believe in Khudi. The question is, do you dare to awaken it? Will you remain a shadow of other people's thoughts? Or will you rise, even trembling, to speak, to act, to create as the living image of the divine? Iqbal's philosophy demands that we confront our sleep directly. Not by escaping the world, but by entering it more consciously. By transforming every action, work, love, art, study into a form of worship, a step toward awakening. The sleeping giant within you is not waiting for luck, but for will, for the decision to rise. For in the moment you decide to rise, the entire universe begins to move with you. The decision to rise is not a single moment. It is a daily rebirth. To awaken Khudi is to enter a lifelong discipline, a sacred rhythm of effort, reflection, and renewal. Iqbal tells us that the self is not a gift, it is an achievement. We are born as potential, not as perfection. Our task is to shape that potential through will and love. But what is will? It is not mere stubbornness or blind force. It is the steady flame that refuses to die in the storm. It is the courage to choose meaning over comfort, and purpose over pleasure. The modern world celebrates convenience. It offers shortcuts to everything except truth. Iqbal warns that comfort is the slow poison of the soul. A person who never wrestles with difficulty never discovers the power that lies within. To awaken the sleeping giant, one must be willing to walk alone, to listen to the inner voice that others ignore. This inner voice, this call of Khudi, is often soft, yet unyielding. It tells you to build when others destroy, to love when others hate, to stand when the world kneels. Love, for Iqbal, is not a passing emotion. It is the fire that purifies the self. It burns away weakness and doubt, transforming the self into a vessel of divine energy. He writes that love is the secret law of creation. Everything that exists, the stars, the oceans, the human heart, is moved by love's invisible current. Without love, life becomes mechanical, and the self becomes a mirror reflecting only emptiness. When a person loves truly, not for gain, not for approval, but for the sake of truth itself, that love becomes a form of worship. It connects the human will to the divine will, and the self begins to expand. Iqbal calls this expansion the growth of Khudi. It is not an ego swelling with pride. It is a consciousness deepening with awareness. It is the soul learning to stand upright before God, not as a beggar, but as a partner in creation. He says, strengthen yourself, so that before every destiny, God Himself will ask you what you desire. This is not arrogance, it is awakening. For the awakened self does not demand from God. It acts through God, becoming a channel of divine creativity. Such a person no longer fears failure. They see every fall as training, every loss as a lesson. Even pain becomes sacred, for it sharpens the will and clarifies the heart. When you begin to live like this, you stop measuring yourself by the world's standards. You no longer ask, what will others think? You ask, what is true? Truth becomes your compass. Love becomes your fuel. Discipline becomes your strength. Discipline, for Iqbal, is not suppression. It is alignment. It is the art of bringing your thoughts, emotions, and actions into harmony with your higher purpose. Without discipline, love burns out quickly. Without love, discipline becomes lifeless. The union of the two, discipline and love, creates what Iqbal calls the living self. Such a self is neither a slave to desire, nor a prisoner of fear. It stands free, rooted, radiant. This is why Iqbal says that every great person, every saint, artist, or hero, is one who has mastered their Khudi. They are awake while the world sleeps. They do not wait for miracles. They become the miracle. To awaken the self is to transform daily life into a spiritual practice. Each act, no matter how small, becomes an expression of your divine purpose. To work honestly, to love deeply, to forgive, to create beauty, to endure pain with dignity. These are the ways the self strengthens. Iqbal reminds us, do not ask the world to change. Change yourself, and the world will follow. This is not a slogan of escape, it is a philosophy of power. It means that transformation begins not in systems or politics, but in the human soul. The world is a mirror of our collective selves. If the mirror shows darkness, it is because we have forgotten our own light. To awaken Khudi is to relight that inner lamp. To become, as Iqbal says, the custodian of divine energy. Once awakened, the self does not depend on praise or fear. It moves with quiet confidence, guided by truth. When this happens, you begin to notice a subtle shift in perception. You see unity where others see division. You see purpose where others see chance. And you realize that life is not happening to you. It is unfolding through you. In awakening your Khudi, you are not escaping from the world. You are transforming your place within it. The sleeping giant rises not to conquer others, but to serve creation by being fully alive. When the self awakens, the entire world begins to reveal its hidden meaning. The sun no longer rises merely to light the earth. It rises to remind you that illumination begins within. The winds no longer wander aimlessly. They whisper that movement is life, and stagnation is death. Iqbal teaches that the universe is not a prison for the self, but a training ground for its evolution. Every challenge, every joy, every sorrow is a lesson sent by the Eternal to refine your consciousness. The awakened person no longer seeks escape from the world. They enter it more deeply, participating in its beauty and struggle with full awareness. Such a life is not passive, it is creative. Creation, for Iqbal, is not limited to art or invention. It is the act of shaping reality through conscious will. Every noble action, every sincere thought, every act of love is a creative moment, a reflection of the divine act of being, and it is. When a person truly awakens their Khudi, they begin to sense the rhythm of divine creativity within themselves. They no longer see themselves as a fragment, but as a participant in the eternal dance of becoming. Iqbal calls this the creative partnership between man and God. It is a profound idea that humanity is not a spectator of destiny but a co-author of it. The awakened self shapes history, not through domination, but through the moral energy of its being. For this reason, Iqbal insists that spiritual awakening must always express itself in action. A self that does not act is like a flame without heat, beautiful, but useless. True faith is not repetition of words. It is the living power that transforms words into deeds. He writes, "Belief without action is a mirage in the desert. Only the traveler who walks finds the spring." To awaken, therefore, is not to dream. It is to live courageously. It is to turn insight into movement, vision into responsibility. When you live like this, your existence gains moral weight. Your presence becomes transformative. People around you feel uplifted by your sincerity, by your quiet certainty, by your refusal to surrender to despair. Iqbal calls this the sovereignty of the self. Not over others, but over one's own inner kingdom. A person who rules themselves, who governs their impulses, and aligns their will with the divine, becomes a light in the chaos of the world. This is the meaning of awakening the sleeping giant. It is not about pride or superiority. It is about responsibility. The more awake you become, the more accountable you are. For your choices, your influence, your silence. An awakened person cannot live in falsehood. They cannot exploit, deceive, or remain indifferent. They are compelled by their inner truth to serve life, to heal, to create, to protect what is sacred. Such individuals, Iqbal says, are God's witnesses on earth. They live in the world, but their hearts are tuned to eternity. They see God not as distant, but as the ever-present source breathing through all things. In this awareness, fear dissolves. Death itself becomes a transition, not an end. For the awakened self knows that existence is continuous, that every ending is only the beginning of a higher form. When the sleeping giant finally rises, it discovers that it was never truly asleep, only unaware of its own immensity. The divine light was always there, waiting for the moment when the will would say, "I am ready." This readiness, this yes to life, is the secret of transformation. In that moment of surrender and strength combined, the self begins to move with the rhythm of creation. The stars above no longer appear unreachable. They become companions in your journey of becoming. The smallest act of kindness, the quietest word of truth, becomes part of the universe's unfolding harmony. This is the destiny Iqbal offers to humanity. Not the small life of imitation, but the vast life of creation. To live not as a shadow, but as a flame. To rise not for power, but for purpose. To walk the earth not as a consumer of its gifts, but as a guardian of its spirit. The awakening of Khudi is the awakening of humanity itself. When one person discovers their inner strength, they give courage to thousands who still sleep. This is how revolutions of spirit begin. Not with armies, but with awareness. Iqbal reminds us that history is moved. not by the masses who follow, but by the few who dare to stand alone in truth. Every civilization begins in the heart of one awakened soul. So, awaken your Khudi. Strengthen your will. Love deeply, act bravely, live consciously. For the world needs the light you carry, and the divine waits patiently for you to remember who you are.